Yes, I think he is purposely looking for these individuals.
The man convicted of killing Kristin Smart is attacked in prison by a fellow inmate. And get this, the suspect, a self-proclaimed Satanist, already confessed to the murder of a different high-profile killer.
I think he's made it pretty clear um, that he is looking for people of this stature. I'm not sure that it's to draw like media attention to him or if he thinks he's settling, some kind of score.
On August 23rd, investigators say Jason Boudreaux attacked fellow inmate Paul Flores at the Pleasant Valley State Prison in California. The attack came less than 1 year after Flores' conviction for the death of Kristin Smart. Smart, a then 25-year-old college student, vanished in 1996 after spending time with Flores at a party near the Cal Poly campus. Former CIA officer and FBI agent Tracy Walder says the motive of the attack doesn't quite add up.
I think in his mind, he is appalled probably by how many people that they killed, even though he's in jail for killing his own girlfriend. Again, not a whole lot of it makes sense.
Boudreaux, who was convicted of the murder of his girlfriend back in 2010, was given another life sentence after the 2021 death of Roger Reese Kibbe, the so-called I-5 strangler. Boudreaux admitted to the murder, saying he planned it for months and groomed Kibbe in the process. When the pair became cellmates, Boudreaux strangled Kibbe to death. Kibbe had previously been convicted in the murder and rape of 7 women. Boudreaux later admitted the murder was sparked by his goal to avenge Kibbe's victims.
He may think that he is, committing prison justice, if you will. If you want me to be completely honest with you, and I'm a professor of criminal justice now, and this is something I tell my students, to me, I'm only 45. I guess that's not that old. It would seem pretty awful to spend the rest of my natural life in prison. That's not something that I can really recommend. And quite honestly, I might welcome death a lot quicker, to be completely honest with you. And so I have to wonder if this really is justice because they're not serving out their kind of full sentences and sort of rotting away in prison, as you will. They're being killed.
Years after Kibbe's murder, investigators say Boudreaux attacked Flores during a transitional period from the rec yard to the medical clinic. Walder says she's not surprised this was the moment Boudreaux chose to lash out.
We've seen these in a lot of the prison breaks and those kinds of things in transit, which is the most dangerous time. So this occurred in between where sort of the cafeteria or mess hall was to the medical center. So I don't know if he planned that, planned a doctor's trip, if you will. But that is typically the most deadly time and most worrisome time. And so that's when, there's a lot of movement. Guards have their own guards down because there's so many other pieces of the puzzle going on.
More than 25 years after her disappearance, Flores was convicted for the death of Kristin Smart. For decades, the case had stalled until the 2021 arrest of Flores and his father, Ruben Flores. Paul Flores was charged with murder and his father charged with accessory. While his father was acquitted by a California jury last fall, Paul Flores was convicted in the crime and later sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. After his attack in August, Flores was hospitalized in serious condition for 2 days.
The more disturbing part, to be honest with you, is if he did prepare this, which I think he probably had to because he is in a maximum security prison. So I do think it probably required a little bit of planning on his part to get in the same cell as him, to manufacture a weapon. Those kinds of things, in my opinion, probably took time. I think what's more disturbing to me is the fact that all of that flew under the radar for perhaps a period of months in a maximum security facility. That's actually what's more disturbing to me.
Officials say Boudreaux used a manufactured weapon in the attack. Walder says the makeshift object could be an everyday item.
We usually forget how lethal everyday objects can actually be. Typically in manufactured weapons, what I have seen used the most are pieces of mirror fragments that maybe broke that they found, and then they attach them to sticks and those kinds of things. Also, things that I've seen are plastic. So they whittle plastic down to a point where the tip is extremely sharp. It can be just as sharp as a pick, and that can kill someone. So I've seen those kinds of things before. Typically, they're given like rubber pencils, rubber pens, those kinds of things. So I doubt that that was what he was using. I suspect he was probably using either kind of a shirt off piece of metal or plastic.
But for Walder, it's still a puzzle as to how the attack happened in the first place.
I think in a maximum security prison situation, particularly in the case of Flores, it's my understanding that he was in an administrative unit, which means solitary confinement. And so they will be on CCTV really the whole day. And so I don't know what people missed in terms of seeing him. I don't think he was working in cahoots with the guards. I mean, maybe he was. Anything is possible, really, at this point, because we saw that in the Casey White case about a year and a half ago now. But I think if he was manufacturing that small of a weapon, it's not something that they would have seen.
She says fellow inmates could have known something was up, but decided to stay silent anyway.
Inmates don't necessarily want to be snitches. And so I doubt an inmate would have necessarily tipped someone off, particularly if it's the I-5 Strangler or Flores, right? You know, those are people who they feel probably deserve whatever's coming to them. I'm not saying that's right or that I feel that way, but there tends to be this kind of agreement amongst prisoners. So I'm not sure that one of them would have necessarily, turned Boudreaux in for doing that.
As for how he targeted Paul Flores, Walder says Boudreaux could have used multiple avenues to learn more about the convicted killer.
I think you'd be surprised how much prison gossip that there is. You don't know if folks there are having communications with the outside world. Maybe they're meeting with family members, in their meetings, and their family members, are saying, hey, can you believe that Flores is going to be coming to your facility? I read, right. And now they're going to go and find out, research. Some of them do get internet time, depending on what their sentences are and what they're in for. It really just depends. And so I'm not surprised necessarily that they knew who these folks were. It's pretty common that they engage in, I guess, prison gossip.
Moving forward, Walder says other inmates could be at risk.
I think everyone's always at risk, right? When you go to prison, depending on the nature of your crime. Obviously, I think we all know this, that child molesters don't fare well in prison. That seems to be their threshold, right? Of what's like not morally acceptable to a lot of prisoners. And so sometimes those that are found guilty of like child pornography, child molestation, they are kept separate for a while, for their own safety. But I think in the case of this, they're probably going to need to re-examine who they put these high profile criminals with, right? Let's say Brian Koberger is convicted and doesn't get the death penalty. The same thing with like Alec Murdaugh. Most likely they are looking at what's best for them and probably vetting whatever the prisoners are that they're with a lot more deeply.
But Boudreaux's status as a self-proclaimed Satanist with a 666 tattoo isn't much cause for concern.
What jails care more about is actually your tattoos of gangs, because that's how they sort prisoners. You don't want to put someone who is in a white supremacist gang with a member of MA or the Mexican mafia. They typically don't get along. You don't want to put someone with MS-13 and MA because they don't get along either. That is what prisons care more about in terms of, preservation of people and not having gang fights basically in prison. I don't know that they care too much about his, Satanist beliefs. That would fall under religion, I guess. It would be more about what his gang affiliation is.
Because he's already serving 2 life sentences, solitary confinement is likely what's next for Boudreaux, at least for now.
Whether we like it or not, prisoners have rights, and we are all protected under the 8th Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment. And so we have to be careful. We can't put him in solitary confinement for the rest of his life. That would be considered cruel and unusual punishment. It's also extremely expensive. My guess is they will have him in a situation, which I think they should have had him in, to be honest with you, before he assaulted Flores, where if he needs medical treatment, if he needs food, if he needs all of those things, he doesn't walk anywhere to get those. Those all come to him. So that way there's no risk of sort of that transit. I think he's going to be in a situation where he doesn't have a cellmate. He's not somebody that should obviously have a cellmate, but he'll be in, kind of that prison bay that you see. He might be in solitary confinement for a while, but I do think he will have interaction in terms of seeing people and those kinds of things. He's obviously not going to go to ADX or Supermax in Flores, Colorado, because this isn't a federal crime, but that would obviously be the ultimate step for him.
Prison officials have recommended charges be filed against Boudreaux in the attack on Flores, but so far, nothing has been filed. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.